So there are a couple episodes, I won't spoil too much, where you definitely get to see Jughead without a hat on, but we've saved it only for real vulnerable and personal moments. Because, yeah, oh dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. And talented too. I told you we only had 2 of these things.
Oh yeah?
So we need someone to help us make some more. Yeah, you only see Jughead without his hat on in super vulnerable moments. Because we had kind of sold it as like his security blanket of sorts. Mm-hmm. And so when he's willing to take it off, it becomes this kind of special, personal, vulnerable thing.
Might he be losing the hat in moments with Betty?
Perhaps.
We've seen episode 6.
I see. Yes, I think the first time he loses his hat is a moment with Betty. And then he loses... So... There are 3 episodes I think he loses his hat. It's episode 10. Get excited! Episode 12, and once this episode as well.
KJ Apple was saying that episode 10 is his favorite episode.
Yes.
Would you say that's the same?
I don't think so. No. Episode 10 is a very well-written episode, and so in its execution, not much was lost. We, at Riverdale, find ourselves writing and performing a lot more than what gets produced in post, and that's kind of natural with any production. So we end up hanging on to certain moments that we love, and then being a little disappointed when they inevitably get cut. But in episode 10, we seem to have kept almost all of the bits that we all really liked, which is why a lot of people love it.
Then can you tell us what episode has been your favorite? Since
I loved 7, which you guys are going to be getting upon.
We just got it.
Yeah, we just got it. We haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I love 7. And I won't tell you why I love 7 because it's going to spoil it, but I think it's going to be a fan favorite episode. I also really love 12. I really love 12. Honestly, from 10 to this final episode, it ramps up in intensity and speed and emotional depth pretty dramatically.
Do you get as surprised by the twists when you read the scripts as we do when we're watching it?
Not as much. I think I was surprised, when we find out the culmination of the narrative, but I think I've also spent the last 6 months or however long I've been here exercising theories and pointing fingers and blaming just about every person on the cast. So when one actually takes hold, which is inevitable, I'm surprised or excited that theory takes hold, but I can't say I didn't see it coming.
Well, when you were filming, say, episode 3, who was your suspicion?
Episode 3, from the very beginning, I had thought Jughead was the killer. Really, and that was informed by a bunch of different things. And it's still, like, the narrative still rings true, but Roberto wrote Afterlife with Archie, in which Jughead was also the antagonist. And in this dark version of the universe as well, Jughead kind of had this shifty outsider perspective. He's also the only one that speaks to the audience and breaks fourth wall, which gives him the ability to inform the audience that he's the killer without having to inform any of the cast living in Riverdale, which ends up being a kind of dubious position to take. And I'm not going to spoil too much, but that's kind of where I had planted myself from the very beginning, was the notion that Jughead was some sort of creepy kid.
Now, you mentioned Afterlife, and actually one of the things we were talking about, we have a Riverdale podcast.
Oh, it's called Archie Digest.
Oh, love it.
But we were talking about the idea that if you guys end up doing an Afterlife episode, rather than being patient zero, would you enjoy doing the crazy noir narration over the apocalypse?
I would love to. The thing that drew me to Riverdale to begin with was the narration. I was really excited to try my Rod Serling out, and I think I love my favorite moments of this show generally are the ones that bury themselves in genre and style elements, and I like the film noir, and I'd love to do that stuff. I would also not mind being Patient Zero. I think that would be fun. I don't know how well I would do as a zombie, but I can always give it a shot.
How good are your hopes for season 2?
They're strong right now. I mean, I think it's hard to ask that question in episode 13, especially because it's the final episode and we're all pretty exhausted. We've given a lot of ourselves in a very, very passionate way to try and ensure that this project has remained critically appraised and remains something that people really enjoy. And I think the idea of a season 2 right now, while being a little distant, still seems to be monumental. So I think after a little break, a little sleep, some sunshine, and some good food, I will be way more prepared for season 2.
Okay, well, no, Jughead, he's got his writing, he's helping Betty out, but could you talk a little bit about his personal motivation for helping with the Blossom murder case?
Well, I think Jughead, the way that I had read Jughead was that he really considers himself to be a special snowflake. I think anyone who takes a stance as the observer and the watcher and one who can write objectively about other people fashions themselves not with a superiority complex, so to speak, but at least with this idea that they are qualified to do so, which complicates where Jughead stands. I also think he's one of those guys who would much quicker criticize someone else's moral complex than point the fingers at himself. And I think he judges and he builds his own personality based on how other people act within the town. So including himself within the narrative of Jason Blossom's murder is really an exercise of self for Jughead. But he has a personal stake in it as well. He's a member of this small town that's deeply interwoven with this tragedy, and so aside from a personal stake, he across the latter half of the season, and really from episode 7 onward, you find out that Jughead has a tremendous stake in Jason Blossom's murder case, and that really ends up getting revealed over time.
How disappointed is he in his father when he finds out about him being behind selling the drive-thru and all that? Or involved in it?
So I don't know if that's revealed to Jughead until much later, but I think I think Jughead's pretty aware of where he stands, and I don't know if Jughead puts his trust in a figure like FP. And would he be shocked to find out at episode 4 or at episode 7? Definitely not. You'll watch episode 7 and you'll come to find out with much more intensity just the relationship between FP and Jughead. And I think to find out his dad is behind some sort of dubious underworkings of the town is not really surprising to him in the slightest. It still disappoints him, sure, but...
With pursuing the relationship with Betty, last time, it's funny because last time we saw you guys were shooting the episode where you have your first kiss.
Right.
And we talked about...
Which is episode 6.
Yeah. And we talked about the idea of like asexual Jughead from the comics and how it was something you were interested in pursuing but you didn't think the writers were. How do you think that the audience response to that will be? Because obviously, with you saying like, "Hey, this is a thing I want to explore," you've got your fans who are pretty vocal.
I think it first and foremost, this conversation deserves more time than something that we can quickly do here. But there are 2 forms of representation Jughead has received over time. In Zdarsky's Jughead, he's asexual. That's the only Jughead where he is asexual. He's aromantic in the digest, which is a different thing, but deserves attention as well. But what I found when I was really diving in, because once we started putting Jughead and Betty together, I started doing research to see if that was a narrative that even existed in the digest. And it turns out it is. It's a narrative that's existed for a long time. There are a handful of digests in which Jughead would say things like, Like, oh, Betty, if I did like women, I guarantee you would be the one I would marry outright. You are the best person around. And say these things that, you know, are really romantic and cute with an appreciation for Betty. And I think it's become clear to me now that Roberto has taken off with that trend. You know, as much as there is a large community of people that really want to see Jughead as asexual, and I am a huge proponent for that kind of representation, there's also quite a large community of avid Archie fans that want Betty and Jughead to be together too. So I think these are things we need to juggle when considering what Jughead is in Riverdale. You know, this is a new universe, this is a new take on Jughead, and he is this tortured, damaged kid, this Holden Caulfield, who ends up finding a lot of comfort in a person who resonates with him, and that narrative itself is also beautiful. And while I think that representation is needed, this Jughead is not that Jughead. This Jughead is not Zdarsky's Jughead, and this Jughead is not the aromantic Jughead. This Jughead is a person who's looking for a kind of deeper companionship with a person like Betty. And Betty ends up being this super nurturing, caring, caretaking person that, you know, with Jughead's screwed up past, they end up really diving into each other, and it ends up being a beautiful thing. How are people going to respond? Truthfully, they're probably going to be quite incendiary about it at first. Do I think that's ill-placed? No. Do I think they should give it a shot? Yeah, I do. Because I think now, after filming 13 episodes, it makes sense to me. And if it makes sense to me as the person who's dumping so much time and especially so much argumentation into trying to represent Jughead correctly, if it makes sense to me, it'll make sense with other people as well.
Will we get to see Jughead's mother by the end of the first season?
You will not, no. But that does become quite a large narrative in the latter half. And not seeing her is almost just as impactful as seeing her in this instance.
And is Jellybean with her?
Jellybean is.
Okay.
And you'll learn about that in 7 as well. Yes, you'll learn about that.
As someone who considers himself to be such an outsider and strives to be on the outside, does he? Would you say that he's going to start to feel over his head with getting involved with
Big
Betty's
time.
family? And,
Big time. And actually, episode 10 plays with that quite a bit. He doesn't. He kind of has, you know, this lone wolf complex. But he distances himself as an attempt not to get hurt. And his direct involvement in writing about this murder puts him smack dab in the middle of all these relationships, and also gives him the power to really hurt and damage people who are close to him, who he finds out end up being way closer to the actual case than he might wish. That includes the younger and older crowd. So he finds this kind, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, and he finds himself in this power position, being able to write this basically a manifesto of the underworkings of the town, and has the ability to really destroy people's lives, and that's a complicated thing to do.
Is there something that you intend to do with the rest of the cast in your last week filming up here for the season?
Honestly, nothing too outrageous. KJ and I are driving back down and to LA and camping along the way, which will be fun. But otherwise, I think we're just ready for some sunshine and ready to get this thing done with and wrapped up in a pleasant and powerful way. And yeah, I don't know. I think we're ready to get the hell out of Vancouver, to be quite honest.
Now, I wanted to backpedal just a little bit. Sure. One of the things you said that I thought was interesting is you're talking about needing kind of a deeper companionship that you haven't had in a long time. Do you think that part of that is the rift with Archie and the fact that you don't have a go-to?
Definitely. I mean, and it's also important to remember that though Betty and Archie, when they were younger, were this kind of cute couple, Jughead, Betty, and Archie were the 3 childhood friends. And so Betty knows Jughead probably just as well as Archie does in certain ways, and she becomes also she is also this sort of nostalgic force that was once morally just. Like I do believe Jughead is absolutely obsessed with what once was Riverdale. And Betty still represents this kind of morality and purity that he associates to this more Peter Pan-like childhood version of Riverdale. And finds great comfort in that and becomes easily accessible and resonates with him. And so, yeah.
Do you think the hat is a representation of old Riverdale?
Definitely. I mean, in the way that this is like this beanie crown, I mean, this is a kind of a childhood symbol for him. He's worn it since he was a child, and you'll see like pictures of baby Jughead basically with the same hat on. But Jughead, probably more than most characters in this show so far, has been most impacted as he grew with tragedy and his distance from childhood, and so it doesn't surprise me that he in some way or another has, like his writings, become absolutely obsessed with this critical, post 9/11 version of Riverdale that takes place, and this rite of passage that distanced him from this sort of beautiful, wholesome childhood into something that's more realized and dark and grim.
Now, there has been a disturbing lack of hamburgers.
That's what people are saying.
Are we going to see
Yeah.
them in the diner more? Are we going to see more of that side of Jughead?
Roberto and I had a conversation about just how much Jughead was eating at first, too. Because I'm a big fan of Death Note, and L in Death Note is one of those characters. Actually, L and Jughead are very similar, now that I think about it, but L in Death Note is one of those characters that eats, and it becomes this sort of cute little trademark of his. And Jughead is this sleuth and this kid who in the digest was constantly eating. So in most scenes, Jughead is eating. It's not a hamburger, though. Because we didn't want to make it like, we didn't want to bait fans over the head with this idea that like this is the digest. They're very fundamental narrative strings that still attach themselves to this sort of old world Archie digest. And one of those things that's the hardest to integrate into a darker version is this kid going, "I need hamburgers!" Like wimpy. And I think we found ways to play with that, and certainly in these last 3 episodes, the burger eating has picked up. But he is eating quite a bit. Whether it's chips, whether it's hamburgers, whether it's sandwiches, a lot of the scenes Jughead is stuffing his face.
Now, what is that like for you as an actor?
Horrible. Absolutely nightmarish. No, I sold enough Danimals on those commercials to be able to understand how to consume foods. But when I know I have a scene where I have to eat a lot, I just won't eat for a couple hours ahead of time and then stuff my face, because I understand that people want to see Jughead eating. And I get it. People want to see him eating, so it's nice in a scene to show him stuffing his face, even if it's for half a second.